I started out as a child actor at the age of about 6. Approach acting or any kind of profession within the arts at a point in your life when you feel that you're consciously making the decision to do it and it's your choice.
In your experience, what can immigrant actors do in order to work in the British market?
Very good question.
Well, hello Zita. Thank you so much for doing this again.
Hello, Sylas. How are you?
I'm actually quite excited, a little bit nervous, not gonna lie. But I mean, first and foremost, I wanted to get the basics out of the way. So you are, I believe you're from the Czech Republic. Is that correct?
That is not correct.
No, it's not. Oh my God.
It's not. I do have a Czech surname. Well,
Right.
part of my surname is Czech because my husband's dad is Czech,
Right.
from the Republic, from Prague. But I'm actually Serbian.
Right.
So,
Okay.
yeah, so my name is very confusing in that not only is it very foreign, but it's also double-barreled and not hyphenated with a Serbian and then a Czech surname. So I think people see my name and they just don't even want to engage with it because it's just too much.
Here's the thing. I got the crew. So I work, and where I work, we've got a couple of Poles. We got someone from Slovakia. I'm from Romania. So basically, I was looking at it, and I was like, guys, help me. And everyone was like, I don't know. Like the Slovakian guy was like, I don't know if there's Czech vaguely. So I'm Googling like the name, and I'm like, it comes up with like science, or like University of Science from like Czech University. And I was like, yeah, I don't know.
Maybe
So
it's Czech. Yeah, it is a Czech surname, although, see, this is what happens, and I've never really thought about it. This is what happens when people move to live to different countries, like, generations ago, or not even that long ago in this case. And then the surnames get changed and modified for the ease of pronunciation in the country that you live in. So I shouldn't really be Zutic because my Z has a little thing and my C has a little thing. So that should be Zhutic. But because that's really difficult for people to pronounce over here, I've taken them off and I just say Zutic. When I'm at home, I say it properly. Cognac also isn't cognac. That's meant to be cognac.
yeah.
If we were doing it properly, it should be Konyakova because it's my married name. So I should have the little ending.
Yeah.
But again, my mother-in-law is also just Konak. She's not changed it. So we're kind of doing this weird, reinterpretation of our surnames, which is quite funny.
Yeah, no, I did. So basically, my Hungarian stage name, well, my English stage name is basically I kept the order of names in Hungarian, which is surname and then your personal name. But then I just basically made my first name my English surname and my stage name. And then I use Sylas, which sounds like my surname in Hungarian because I like the name and it vaguely sounds similar. So it's like, it's one of those ones. We're adapting to the Western market pretty much.
So, okay, so Sylas isn't actually your first name. It's your second name.
Well, so my Hungarian surname is Seles, right?
Okay.
And I just picked Sylas because I thought it sounded cool. And I was like, sounds like my surname, stick it in there. Something for the English folks, something for me. Everybody gets, I get to keep half of it.
How do you pronounce what is now on screen there that I can see as your surname? What do you pronounce that?
Szabolcs. That's a Hungarian historical first name, Szabolcs.
Szabolcs. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, it's again because like people have no idea about that part of the world. Like Eastern Europe is like so just locked down for 50 years. So people are like, I don't know. Cool. So Serbia, right? Well,
yes.
I gotta ask. I don't know which came first. Because I know you do directing as well, or if you have done directing.
I used to, yeah.
Casting directing. Is there anything else that you do, or should probably?
It's a very long story.
Well.
If you have time.
Hey.
Basically, I started out as a child actor at the age of about 6. My mum worked with this drama studio in Belgrade. My mum had a pretty incredible life herself. She's done lots of different jobs and had many careers. And one of those jobs was she used to work as an assistant director on film shoots. And there was this place in Belgrade where they would always get kids from. We don't really have agents casting director system in Serbia. We still don't.
Yeah.
It simply goes, there's a couple of drama studios and schools for kids where they would get kids for like shows and TV series and stuff. It used to be really just that one place where I went to. And then you go to drama university, and then if you're good, you get work. You don't need an agent. You don't need anyone taking
Yeah, it's
percentage.
very much networking and people recommending. The same goes in Hungary and Romania as well. Like,
so I was 6 and I was very interested in everything and anything. And my mum asked me, oh, do you want to go and audition for this drama studio? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'd love to do it. And then I ended up going to the drama studio for 11 years. And whilst I was there, did mainly theatre. And it just kind of, I grew up thinking that I wanted to be an actor. And then when I finished high school, because in Serbia, it's you finish high school and then you go to university. And if you want to study acting, there's only really one place worth going to. There's lots of different private universities now, but back then there was only Drama University of Belgrade, and you have to do this very kind of rigorous audition that takes like 2 weeks.
There's that.
I mean, we're very much, we're very much kind of, we do it all, you know, it's the Stanislavski method. It's very much kind of how it's done in Russia as well. So it's,
I was gonna say, yeah,
it's very intense. And I just felt that I wasn't sure whether acting was something that I genuinely wanted to do, or whether it's just something that I believed I wanted to do because I've been doing it so long. You know, when you start doing something at the age of 6, how much of it is really your choice? I was just a little kid. I wanted to do everything. You know, I did ballet as well. And I went to my, you know, my English classes, and I did all sorts of movement and dance and lots of different things. And then I thought, well, because you can't study drama in a wider sense in Belgrade, you kind of need to specialize straight away. So you know, it's either acting or directing or producing or writing. You need to know straight away what you want. And no one really takes a gap year in Serbia or 2, or, you know, goes traveling and, you know, gets a job. You just do high school and then you go to university. There's
they have the fear that you like forget how to learn. Like, I remember people like, what are you doing? You need to go straight to uni, because after you're gonna just you won't be able to learn anything. Like, okay, but sure.
And then I, through some friends and kind of family contacts and stuff, I went to Edinburgh in 2000 and 2001, and I assisted Professor Richard DeMarco, who's this very interesting, kooky guy in Edinburgh. He's kind of curator of artists. He has all these connections with Joseph Beuys. He's the first one to bring him to the UK. He's been working with Edinburgh Fringe and the festival for so many years. He curates these exhibitions. He's an artist himself. Very, very interesting guy. And I was kind of his PA almost for those 2 years. I failed to mention, actually, prior to that, I started a journalism course in Belgrade, and I took 2 exams. I did English and economics, got the highest and the lowest mark. And I just thought that was my way of, you know, trying to figure out whether I really want to be, you know, in the kind of creative world, drama, theatre, or whether I should just take a step back. We'll come back to this. I do this a lot, the stepping back and kind of reassessing and doing something different. And then I thought, because in Serbia, journalism,
it's a bit more risky.
Was that?
It would be a bit more risky.
Yeah, no, but it's also just the journalism side of it. You kind of don't really get to the meat and potatoes of it till like year 3. Up until then, you're kind of studying like law and economics, like combined, which for me, I'm not the most academic orientated person. Like, I'm massively, you know, someone who even here at university did all my essays, you know, the night before. I like the stress, I like the pressure, I like the practical stuff, the presentations and stuff, but the actual like sitting down for hours and studying and revising and taking exams, I just couldn't hack it. So then went to Edinburgh, first 2 years, met some really nice people who were studying at Kingston University, and they were the first year of drama there. And they were so in love with their course. They just kept going on about it, how it's the best thing ever. And their drama course leader is this guy called Frank Waitley, who then became my course leader when I went there. He's this wonderful, warm man, encyclopedia of knowledge when it comes to theatre and drama in general, playwrights. It's just a brilliant guy. And then I decided that I was going to go there, had to wait another year, and then I enrolled in 2003. And that was actually what I wanted to do, which was drama in a wider sense. And
right.
Drama here at university level, you know, you have directing modules, you have acting modules, you have writing, but producing, you can do all sorts of different things. And I also didn't only do drama. I majored in drama, but I minored in film. And the film stuff was pure theory. So we didn't do any like practical bits, but it was just really learning about history of cinema that I knew nothing about prior. You know, I went to the cinema a lot. I watched lots of films. I was very much into my European cinema. We'll have some really cool festivals in Belgrade that I was always going to. But history of cinema, you know, French New Wave, stuff like that, I knew nothing about. So that was all really fascinating to me. And whilst I was at Kingston, I directed, I've done a little bits of directing kind of as a part of the course, but then I did Sarah Kane's play Crave that I directed, and ended up being in it as well, but not through choice. Someone, an actress pulled out last minute and we couldn't recast, and I was like, okay, fine, I'll just do it. And actually realized for the first time how much I stopped enjoying being on stage. It just wasn't doing anything for me. I didn't have that excitement. I didn't have that drive. I wasn't like, oh, really excited about, you know, interacting with other actors on stage, delivering my lines, having all this thought process and stuff. What I kept doing is just listening to them and, you know, kind of making sure that things are happening as we've, you know, kind of put it all together. And actually the process of directing in the rehearsal room is what I enjoy the most. So I was like, right, theatre directing, that's what I want to do. I'm going to make, and then as every, you know, drama student, especially in this country, I was like, I'm going to go and do a master's, which I did at Central, which is now Royal Central Speech and Drama, but it used to be just Central School of Speech and Drama. And I was on the devised course. It was called Advanced Theatre Practice, but it's basically all devised theatre, and you have different strands. And I was on the directing strand. And during that year, with a friend of mine, we kind of started our own theatre company and doing some stuff after. And that was very, yeah, that's what I was saying, as every drama student in the country, what that was like, we're going to do these like interactive, site-specific performances. We're going to challenge people's thinking. We're going to do one-on-ones. Yeah, it's just very, it's very cute now looking back, but it's very, you know, you're kind of just pretentious drama students, like just, there were some nice things about it, but I think just looking back, I don't know how we ever thought it could be an actual thing, you know, that God forbid we might be making some money from. We had lots of fun. We kind of did lots of, because it was between theatre and performance art and live art, and wasn't kind of really like a defined thing as devised theatre often is. Did lots of really nice festivals and met some people and started rehearsing. Like our first big show, we cast 3 other actors. We got a rehearsal space in Mile End. It was all going great. But I just felt we were all doing like multiple part-time jobs. Right. Just to kind of keep ourselves afloat, you know, shops, bars, what have you. And then we'd be, you know, rehearsing like 3 hours on a Monday and then 2 hours the following Thursday. And I was like, we're never going to make the show. We need to be in a rehearsal room for like, you know, 4 weeks, like really work on this, get it made. And then, you know, and it just wasn't possible at the time because we all had to work and keep ourselves afloat. So I kind of stepped away from that. The company disbanded. And I then had a whole like, what do I want to do yet again? Who am I? What is this? You know? Did some other things completely unrelated. I was a receptionist and then a manager at hairdressers, which is just really close by. I'm still friends with people who owned it. That's kind of actually how I got to meet like a lot of my local community in Stoke Newington, just from working in a shop and then knowing all the other shop owners and knowing all the locals. So now, even though we don't technically live in Stoke anymore, but whenever I'm there, I just know all the people from having worked in that shop.
Yeah.
And my husband at the time was working at a production company called Partisan. He was in there at the time was called dubbing department. So it's kind of like an in-house editing and a little bit of post. And through his contacts, I just started being a runner on Partisan commercial shoots.
Right.
And then, you know, a couple of commercials, then you meet a first AD who you really get on with, who then recommends you for another job, and it just kind of snowballs from there. And I always say to people, if they want to, you know, if they want an in, they don't know how to. I mean, running is great because A, you get to experience what it means being on set, but B, it also exposes you to all the different production roles. So if you're unsure what you want to do, it's a great way to kind of see what other people are doing and kind of, you know, being very hands-on and interacting with everyone. And I did that for a good few years. I was kind of production runner, set runner, third AD, second AD on some smaller kind of like short films and music videos and stuff. Then I did Tim Burton's stop motion film Frankenweenie, which was a very cool, very kind of formative experience for me in that I did that job for close to 10 months, which is obviously unheard of, you know, no shoot lasts that long, but in stop motion, I think they were just under 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. So I was kind of there for half of them, maybe like a year and a half. It's a very long process. Obviously, you know, animators do like, if they're really fast, 2 seconds a day. You have 30 units. I had like 10 to look after of these smaller sets. And basically your third assistant director is kind of effectively a floor first. So you're managing your units, you're reporting to the second and the first AD, and you're kind of overseeing the process that happens in each unit, which is, you know, art department come in, they do the set, camera people come in, they do, you know, they light the set, do everything, puppet hospital, bring the puppets, excuse me, do all the like final checks and stuff. Animators do their thing, VFX come in, do the plates. Like there's so many different steps for each of the shots. And you're kind of managing that process and making sure that everything's running smoothly and on time is the idea. And you're constantly kind of like, you know, pressuring the people to go faster in a nice way because, you know, it's such a massive thing. And obviously, you know, things always run over and all of that. And that was, to start off with, that was probably potentially the most scary professional experience that I'd ever had up to that point, because working in animation it's its own thing, and I felt starting that they were all speaking like Chinese or something. And I was completely out of it. I had no idea what anyone was talking about. You had to learn everything really fast. You're on the walkie-talkies with your AD team all the time. I learned a bit. I had a very, very good team. I had a first called Kev Harwood, who's still a friend, and Rich, who was our second, and then my team, Mark and Gemma, and a few other people who came and went, Alan. You learn that you only need to deliver very essential information. So when you're chatting to your team, they want to know what's happening. You need to be very quick, very precise. There's no long explanations. This is what's happening, and this animator has said this, and because da. They're like, no, Zita, is it going to happen when we said it was going to happen or not? How long do they need? It was very intense, very, very lovely, because, you know, normally I'd be on a commercial shoot. Sometimes when it's a really big commercial for like a week at Pinewood, like I've done a couple of big Virgin Atlantic ads and stuff like that, and you're like, oh wow, it's a week shoot and we're all together and this is so cool. This was like 10 months for me, every day with the same people, you know, having our pub lunches on Friday, just having those relationships that you don't normally have on shoots. You know, you're lucky if you're kind of part of the similar team and you kind of go from one job to another, but still most of the people are new. So every time you start something, it feels like a first day at school. you're like, hi, this is me, and you have to do this whole
And
thing.
everybody knows everybody else except you, and you're like,
Yeah, exactly. So this actually felt closer to theatre because you had a longer time putting something together, and then you were kind of doing it together for a period of time. Because also, I don't know if it's the same in Hungary or in Romania. It's theatres in Belgrade. They're all kind of repertoire theatres. So there'll be like 10 shows on at one theatre. And you know, when the show first opens, maybe it's on like 4 or 5 times a month, and the rest are only one or a couple. So you can be in a show, like the show that I was in as a kid. I was in it for like over 10 years. I changed roles over time because I started off as a small kid, and then I was a teenager, and like, yeah. So I kind of, I guess,
casting types basically.
Was that?
You change your casting types basically.
Exactly. But yeah, I guess I just missed having that continuity of relationship with people I worked with, which I really wasn't getting as an AD. And I also think, so hit pause on that. But basically, after Frankenweenie, I went back to commercials, and I just found it just really tough, because working on this very particular film, there's not many of them made, and they're mainly now all happening through Leica, and that's all like in the US. 3 Mill Studios, kind of, they had a massive refurb and stuff, and none of it's happening to the same extent as it used to, you know, with Frankenweenie and Corpse Bride and Fantastic Mr. Fox and all those films that got made here. Yeah, and then I went back to commercials, and I was like, oh, I just feel like a little, you know, cog doing my little thing, not really, you know, no one particularly asks you for your opinion or for any kind of creative input. And we did have that on the animation film. You know, you had to make lots of snap decisions and decide things, and, you know, come up with solutions and think, oh, you know, maybe we should actually get our department guys after, because, you know, you had so much space to actually feel like you're collaborating with people. Whereas, you know, being an AD on commercials, you know, you're very much just executing tasks, you know.
Yeah,
or whoever you're first, you know, they tell you what needs doing, and then you just go and do it. And I missed the creativity.
I was just gonna say that, like, obviously watching films and growing up watching films, everybody is exposed to the glitz and glamour, and everybody knows the actors and stuff, but not many people are aware of the entire military style operation that's going on behind the scenes. And there's a bunch of different careers that you can get into, but it's, even though it's the arts, and the arts are famously, you know, like, oh my god, so, you know, hippie-ish and whatever, but that's not the experience once you actually get into a production. Like, it's very go and do
go and do this in, you know, the required time or less. And and it was just, I think, I have a friend who's kind of she's moved on up in the AD department. It's an intense, being an AD, it's an intense job, in a sense that you're first on set, you're last to leave, you need to keep on top of everything. I mean, people who are first ADs, like people who do it, you know, at very high level, you know, for the likes of Marvel and what have you, they're by and large men. They're very kind of particular personalities, in that they're great at what you do, but maybe, you know, personal lives suffer somewhat. You know, you are on these shoots for a long period of time. You kind of begin to feel that that's you at your best at those high intense situations, and then when you're not on film, you are missing that world. And outside, was that?
It would be a rush of just having all these parts that you're responsible for.
It's a massive rush. So then when you're not on the shoot, you almost kind of don't really know how to function in the real world. But I mean, it just kind of became apparent to me, like, that I wasn't really getting my creative needs fulfilled, being an AD, and B, I did think, oh, you know, at one point I would like to have a family. And, what would that look like if you're, getting up at 5 and coming back late every night? And I wanted to do features, which often means, a lot of location stuff. And it's just,
Yeah.
it was just kind of beginning to feel more and more not really something that I felt. Don't get me wrong, I mean, even now, I love my job, I love what I do, but my time outside of what I do for work is just as important, if not more important,
And you do need that sort of
Yeah,
balance, if not just harmony. This you need something
yeah.
other.
And I think for me personally, doing a job that's kind of all consuming and doesn't leave much space for anything else, it just wasn't going to work. So
Yeah.
then I stopped ADing. I'm trying to remember what I was probably doing some part-time bits and pieces. And then a good friend of mine who I worked with on some commercial shoots, who's a producer, she's not a producer anymore. We had a little chat. I was just kind of meeting up with people who I worked with and just picking their brains as to, literally what do you think I should do next? Because I was so at a loss as to, I very much miss theatre and I miss directing, but I knew that, in order to feel fulfilled and happy doing that, it would need to be at a, professional level. And it became quite apparent that as a foreign woman living in this country, there weren't that many opportunities to get into directing, or at least assisting, working theatre directors and kind of getting in that way. It felt very much like, every internship, kind of assistant, job for no money, etc., that I applied for, I'd get a response saying we had over 2,000 applications, and it just felt like people who were getting those spots were predominantly men, and very much from the UK, at least some of them with connections to the theatre world, and a lot of them having read English at Oxford and Cambridge, and it was just kind of feeling very exclusive. And I knew that I didn't want to, which is why we put a stop to the whole company thing, is that I didn't want to do something that felt like a hobby. You're doing a thing, you're really invested, and then you stop to think like, can I realistically imagine this ever being a career, like a job whereby money comes in and, okay, maybe I need to do something else, but at least something's coming in and I can actually live off this thing that I do? Or whether it's just always going to be, us putting our own money into it, trying to make things happen, applying for grants, not getting them. It was just all feeling very, no disrespect for people who do it at an amateur level. I think that's brilliant, but I think you go into it as a kind of, oh, let's just do it for a little bit of fun. But I think
there's different expectations.
Yeah. And I think when a thing that you kind of, want it to be your career and your calling, and it begins to feel like a hobby, for me at least, that meant that it was time to stop. Which is how then ADing came about. And then again, as I said, this kind of whole rethinking, oh, what do I do next? What do I do next? And then this very good friend of mine said, well, have you thought about casting? And I'm not ashamed to say, so this is 10 years ago, that I'd never thought about casting.
Well, again, because casting's not is like a thing established as much back home. Like, if that's what you have in mind, if that's sort of, as you said, working as a child actor and then coming here and doing things, you don't think of like there's this entire network that's happening and there's agents. Because people go, I work with someone who did this and they were very good and they're decent or they're not a pain in the ass, so let's get them in.
Yeah. But I mean, you watch a film, there's, casting director, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, yeah, there's a person who does something and they find the actors, but you don't really know how it works. And then I was like, yeah, all right. Okay. That means I get to work with actors again. Okay, cool. I've done a few things kind of on my own, like little, music videos. with no budget and little, you know, at the time it was called street casting, you know, getting a few people for a campaign, just like stopping people on the street and
The real
you know,
people and stuff, yeah.
lots of abuse. Yep. And then I got a first couple of kind of freelance gigs with Kate and Lou, Kate Evans and Lou Sminitsky at Kate and Lou Casting. And then that's kind of how the whole casting journey started for me.
Right. I mean, wow. That that was a pretty cool story. I'm not gonna lie. You kind of covered most of the things that, well, some of the things I would ask, because I would ask, you know, how come the UK, but you kind of covered that one bit. Uh, yeah, you've
Sorry, very long. I did tell you it's a very long story.
no, you've had a roller coaster. I mean, this is what I like. There's so many moving parts when it comes to like any immigrant, but like even in the arts, it's like there's so many things that have to happen, and you have to just go left and right and zigzag and reconsider and start over. And but well done,
Yeah.
you. That's well done. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I mean, that's straight. The one thing that stood out to me from the very beginning, you are a working child actor in Eastern Europe. How is that? Because I come from a different background. Like my parents were fairly religious. Acting, like I discovered I want to become an actor at 18. Right. Up until then, I was gonna become a software engineer, and that was it. So, like to me, that's something was so foreign growing up, just being in the arts, and the fact that you were already in it as a child. That kind of, I'm curious. Like, what is that like?
It's pretty fun because it's only really theatre that I did. I've done a couple of little kind of TV stuff, but nothing, you know, very, very minor things. And theatre was really cool in that I've done 2 productions, both of which ran like one for like 3 years and the other one for like 11 years, something ridiculous like that. So rehearsals are fun. Then you go and do the show a few times a month. You see your friends, you know, you go and travel. We went abroad. We went to like Germany and Austria and like lots of different places all around the country performing the show. That's always really fun. I was the kid like running around the theater, like knowing where all the like secret like doors are to come out the back through the audience, to come to the side, to go backstage. And I was like, I loved doing that. There's a lot of oh, I should not be saying this. This is not a good thing that I did. But there was a lots of like, you get annoyed from the theater, like if you're needed for a show, you need to be like there early, or you're going on a trip or whatever, you need to miss school. But I somehow got like a whole stash of these, and then at times using it like, yeah, we're having to make some changes to the show. We're going to be rehearsing tomorrow. I won't be coming. There's like already a stamp and everything. Oh, I did some really bad things like that. But I mean, I did
watching is really bad. For adults, it's like
yeah. Yeah, it was tons and tons of fun. And that first show that I was in, it was like a massive ensemble piece. Like we're talking over 40 actors and like some really big names of like, you know, Belgrade and Serbian and kind of even all like Yugoslavian kind of acting elite were in the show, and I get to watch them do their thing, and it was just so inspiring. And I think from then on, like I'm saying to my husband, like we've got a little girl, she's 2.5 now, and she's displaying all the signs of an actor in making. God help me, there's lots of like standing up, singing a song in front of her entire like nursery class without anyone asking her, and all of this. And I'm like, all I want is for her to not be an actor. She can do whatever else she wants, anything. I'll support anything. She can drive a bus, be a cleaner, be a scientist, be an accountant, whatever she wants to do, I'll be fully supportive, just as long as she's not an actor. Because I remember being like, I did that show when I was 7 or 8, and it is like a virus at that age. You are with adults and you are there and you're treated as an adult, which is very addictive. No one speaks down to you. You are just one of the team, and you are all there to play, and you're playing together, and you're getting paid for it. And then there's the whole, like, you know, the crew, all the stuff that happens backstage, you know, your changing rooms, all that kind of atmosphere, you know, the bar downstairs after the show, like that whole world is so addictive.
Yeah.
Which is why I think stepping away from theatre was so hard for me when I did make that decision. I literally couldn't go and see a show for a year. I was just crying all the time, whatever I'd see. Because it's a very, very unique world. And I know child actors, people who do a lot of film, they say the same, you know, of being on set, doing like long running films, etc. It's a very addictive thing.
The way you're treated by not just your co-stars, but even like other people. So I did a couple of shows in London, and just I go in and say hello, and the lady who's like the admin lady is like, "Oh, the artist has arrived," or, you know, "Sir," and I'm like, "You're like literally 40 years older than me. Don't call me sir." Like, I'm coming from like Eastern way, like you say thank you, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir. So like, it's very odd to be suddenly put on a pedestal a bit.
Yeah, but it's also just this kind of feeling like, oh, we're all in it together, we're collaborating, we're making this magical thing, it's all off the moment. The audience, like in Serbia, I don't know if it's the same for you back home, but like when you go and see a show, it's not like here. The actors don't come out for like, you know, to take a bow once. Like in Serbia, you come out as long as people are applauding. So sometimes it's like 10, 15 times, like if you had an amazing night. Just keeps going. So it's like this kind of weird, it's, as I said, like so many times already, it's a very addictive thing. So I find she'll probably be an actor, whatever, and I'll just be depressed for the rest of my life.
But you hang on, you have all this backstory and all these lessons that you can pass on. So if
Exactly.
anyone has a great chance, it's her.
I just think it's important to approach acting or any kind of profession within the arts, but especially acting, because I think it's such a hard job to do, at a point in your life when you feel that you're consciously making the decision to do it and it's your choice, rather than I've been doing it since I was 6 years old and now I just think that is the thing that I do and that I want to do, but it's only because I'm not done anything else.
Yeah.
So I think it's actually better to come at it later on in life as an adult, because then at least, you know, yeah, I'd like to think at least you know a little bit more about what you're getting yourself into than when you're
also
a kid.
having your own source of validation already set up, as opposed to getting lost in all the applause and the bowing and all that, as you've mentioned. Because yeah, I mean, we look at child stars, you know, someone from obviously from America that we know, and you're like, oh wow, that went off the rails. But then you're like, but what else was gonna happen? I mean, yeah, obviously they have a choice, but it's just the environment is not set up. Like, there's a reason they all need therapists.
And I think it's, you know, I think often, well, especially in the US, but let's not even go there. But I think it's, you know, if you don't have a solid family base and solid family support, and no one there to, like, you know, talk you down and just to say that's all fine, but that's just a job that you do. And when you come home and when you're with your friends and your family, you know, you're not special, you're just a normal person. So you just leave that over there. I think it's easy to kind of get caught up in this, yeah, as you said, you know, people putting you on a pedestal and thinking you're special. Yeah, God forbid, like if you're famous, that's even, I don't even.
I think it's also simply the fact because you do something in public, and a lot of people have this fear of public speaking, and they automatically go, oh, you must be so brave. I could never do that. Like, you're fundamentally this unique, you know, talent that can do this thing that nobody else can. And you're like, I'm talking.
In front of some people.
Yeah. Fair enough. Let's take a quick break because my timer's gonna run down. So, and then I'll get back to you straight away. But thank you.
Pleasure.
Alrighty, welcome back. Well, that kind of brings casting into, you know, that's sort of the next topic that comes up. But I think before we get into it, I wanted to ask, you know, why the UK? How come the UK? Because that's something I'm always interested in. People choose the UK for a variety of reasons.
English is the only other language that I'm fluent in, and was kind of fairly early on. I started, because we do English at school.
Yeah.
here you do language schools. So I did a bit of Russian for like a couple of years because I changed schools at some point, and then did German, but did English throughout my, primary school and high school. But that's never really enough. So I went to this language school from like when I was 6 years old, and then had a private tutor for a long time. And it was just something that my parents were always kind of very on it about. Like, you have to speak English. Like, it's great, have a great command of your own language, very important. But when you come from somewhere as small as Serbia, you have to speak at least another language. Otherwise, if you want to live anywhere else, it's just impossible. No one speaks Serbian other than Serbs. So yeah, that was the thing. And then also, just the love of theatre and this whole idea of studying drama in a kind of wider sense. Where would that be? And then just this chance encounter with Edinburgh Fringe and this course, and it just all kind of snowballed from there. I always knew that I would leave, purely because, and I love my city and I go back very often, and I still have very close friends there, and a lot of them are professional actors and playwrights and producers and directors, etc. But for me, it kind of became apparent very early on that it's a very limiting place, in that at the age of 18, I already felt like I knew who's who, and that will be it, for the next 40 years or more of working life. Like, those will be the people that I'd be coming into contact with, and that would be it.
And to be fair, so I was just gonna say, for some people that's great. Some people love that stability, but for myself, I just felt it suffocated as well.
Yeah, I mean, whether it was suffocating still at the time, I was only young, and I wasn't even like, studying acting or anything like that. It just kind of felt like, it's also, I don't know if it's the same for you, but there is a bit of a tendency, especially if you're from Belgrade. I think people who come from other parts of the country might have a better experience because they move to Belgrade to study, and they have to work harder at it because they're not from there. And then they kind of build their life from nothing, and then they kind of have this sense of achievement. But if you're from Belgrade, that means that when you go to university, you stay at home, because that's university center. You don't go anywhere else, which means that you then stay living at home with your parents for the entire time of being a student.
And that's
which is crazy.
Not ideal.
No one ever really has, like a part-time job, works in bars and stuff, because you don't have to, because, you're studying, that's your thing, and your parents support you. And then, you graduate, you get yourself a job, and then, you move out, or, you meet someone, you move in together, whatever. Yeah. But I'm very much someone who needs the right environment to be my most productive, best self. And in Serbia, and studying in Serbia at universities, we have kind of these exam periods, and then you can sit your exam in that period. But then if you didn't revise enough and you're not gonna, take your exam, then you can do it, you can do it later. You can do it at another, slot, which means that very often people end up studying something that's a 4-year course. They do it in 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And it's just this long protracted thing.
Oh wow, okay.
Like when I started journalism, there were already like people who were, as they say, on the budget. So you kind of get in based on your entry exam and your marks and stuff, so you don't have to pay for anything. And then there were people who had to like pay a little bit, and then there were people who had to like pay full fees. But I mean, that's still, comparatively to the UK, we're not talking like the same amount. It's still very, very cheap.
It's the same back home as well, I remember.
Yeah, but before it was only budget. It was only, you get in and you do the course and it's all free, which there was also, apart from this thing of like, this feels too small for me, it was also the fear of, if I stay here, there is a possibility that I'll end up doing very little, because there's this kind of attitude of, you can if you want to, but you also don't have to, because there's always a later point in time where you can do the thing that you're supposed to do. Whereas here, you know, coming to the UK studying drama, it was like, you either, you know, do all your essays, do all your presentations, do all your exams, and if you don't pass them all, you have to repeat a year, and that additional year is additional year of overseas fees for me as a non-European student, non-EU student. So that's just not an option. So you have to do it all. So you do it all in the time that you're supposed to do it.
I mean, that's kind of, I mean, that is pretty brave of you, because you did, and self-aware, because you said, I'm going to choose a higher difficulty, but it's going to be more fun, more engaging, more challenging. And it just, yeah, that means I will get something done. And also the fact that you recognize your environment, that was, I mean, that's
I mean, it's kind of, I think at the time when you're, you know, 18, 19, 20, you don't necessarily even have it so kind of clear in your head, but you just have this feeling of like, something's not sitting right, and I need something different and bigger and new and somewhere else. And I mean, for my parents, it was quite tough because they only have me. I'm an only child, and they were not in a financial position to comfortably finance me studying abroad, not in the slightest. So they had to make lots of sacrifices. Serbia at the time didn't offer any scholarships for people studying abroad, or they did, but there was the, you know, they would, and nothing to do with the arts, but for example, they would, you know, give a scholarship to someone going to MIT for a year to then come back and carry on, or, you know, set up a business, or, you know, kind of bring back the knowledge that they gained elsewhere back to the country, but not, you know,
which is fair play to them. It makes sense as a country that you want.
Yeah. And obviously, you know, Serbia, we're still not in the EU, but obviously weren't at the time. There's no, you know, there's nothing from the EU that you can get. There's nothing. I did 3 years for my BA and a year of my MA, and they were all overseas fees, which is so much money. And obviously so much money on top, you know, paying for like a flat to live in. And I worked throughout uni. I always worked pubs and shops and some other pubs and some other shops, and I always worked and always had a job, because I just felt like, even though, you know, both my BA and my MA, I was at uni like all day every day, but like weekends, evenings, I'd always be working, because I just thought, you know, well, it's costing my parents so much money that I absolutely cannot just then be expecting, you know, for them to send me money on top of everything that they're paying for. So that was a very, like, my husband and I, because we met at university, we always have this, we kind of like to reminisce back in the time when, you know, when we were students, and we had days where literally like the fridge was empty and had not been paid by the pub. It was not until tomorrow, and we had like £1.50 between us. And I think those experiences are so important. And I think if I'd stayed in Belgrade, I wouldn't have had any of those experiences. Not to mention, again, it might be similar for you for where you come from, but it's also like, you're in Belgrade, pretty much everyone's exactly like you, you know? They're a Serb, they're born in Belgrade, they're white, they are, you know, my parents have friends who are Catholic and Muslim and stuff, but very limited amount of, you know, people who are different in some ways. And I think that was the thing that when I first moved to London, it was just this constant like turning around and seeing all these different cultures and being so excited by it, because we just don't get that.
Well, yeah, because these are historically isolated countries, and before that, travel wasn't that big of a thing. Like, so yeah, it makes sense that it would be very homogenous.
Yeah.
And
I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some really cool things about it. And like, what's really nice about, I always say to people who've not been to Belgrade, is because we're not in the EU, there's still that kind of authenticity there that I feel like once you join the EU, then, you know, every kind of major European city high street is very similar. You have all your shops, you have all your things. And there's kind of this feeling of like, oh, you don't even know where you are anymore. Not to say that I'm pro-Brexit, because obviously I'm not, and I think EU is a great thing, and I love the idea of Europe. But just in terms of, I think it's been very difficult for countries to kind of,
multinationals, like,
yeah, to like maintain their authenticity, which we still somewhat have. Less and less so, you know, like all small countries, you know, we're selling our industries left, right, and center. Don't get me started on the political situation. That's a whole different Zoom that I can do like 6 hours on. It's, you know, we struggle with, you know, people in power and who represents us. It's never, I can't remember the last time that it was someone who, me, my family, my friends, felt that it was representative of who we are as people and what we believe in. And, you know, it's always the opposite, and you're always kind of fighting against something. But yeah, it's a very cool place to go to visit. To lots of my friends who are actors have been like doing lots of filming in Belgrade and elsewhere in Serbia. They have the best time. Everyone is always out. Things are always happening. It's kind of like a smaller, yeah, it's like a smaller, grittier Berlin, if you want. Like that's kind of the closest I can compare it to, but still very much its own thing. Maybe between like, I don't know, maybe between like Berlin and Prague, maybe, but not as kind of, you know, historically beautiful as Prague. Because we got bombed several times over, so there's not much of the old stuff left. But yeah, I think at that age you don't really necessarily know really like, oh, you know, this feels too small and I want a bigger challenge. You just kind of have this niggling feeling, and then an opportunity presents itself and you're 20, and then you're like, well, I'm just gonna move. I'm just gonna move to the UK. And no one questioned, like my parents didn't question it. You know, they were, I mean, my parents are pretty unusual, pretty awesome people. So that's unsurprising coming from them. They're not your kind of box standard, like, no, you have to get a job that pays the money and you stay here and you're not going anywhere and any of that. They're completely the opposite. But we didn't have any family here in London. Like my dad had a friend who I kind of saw maybe a couple of times, but it's not like I had them for support or anything like that. I literally came with my suitcases, and it just all, you know, we figured it all out. I had friends.
Fly or take the bus?
Was that?
Did you fly or take the bus?
No, I flew.
Oh, okay. I took the bus.
You took the bus?
Yes.
What was that like?
It was odd. It was 33 hours. I got off at 4 a.m. in London at Morrison's.
Nice.
And the adventure began, yeah.
But isn't it funny how when you're that age, like when you're in your early 20s, you just don't question things at all. There's not this like, oh, you know, how will I, but when I get there, and will I know how to do this, and how will I, so you're like, we'll figure it out. We just get there.
I questioned some of it, but I was like, people live there, you know, like, and I was quite lucky. My dad raised me with, if someone else did it, you can do it too, which is a brilliant way to, you know, get someone motivated. Because it's like plenty of people have moved abroad, they figured it out. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is quite fascinating with the UK, especially because it has been exporting its culture the same as America for like better half of a decade. So they get surprised when people are, you know, rocking up, because we've been watching your movies and learning your culture and your language, and like, why do they want to come here? Because that's what we see. That's like the dream. You've been selling us this story, so obviously we're attracted to it and we're gonna navigate towards it.
Yeah, and it's, yeah, exactly. I mean, in Belgrade we're more exposed to, you know, British and American TV and films. Just on TV. Yes, in cinemas we have like, you know, a lot of French cinema, a lot of, you know, like German, Austrian, Spanish cinema, like it all happens. And I think bizarrely more so than here. I feel sometimes it's harder to like go and see a European film in a cinema in the UK, or they'll have like a tiny little release of like a week for like one slot a day, and it's like, what are you doing? But in terms of kind of just general, you know, exposure to culture, it's definitely all either American or British. and it's just everywhere, which is also why all of my friends, I mean, everyone who knows Serbia, everyone speaks pretty decent English. And a lot of the people didn't even, do any kind of extra, lessons and language schools and stuff. It's just from consuming the culture, from music as well.
I mean, I think the running joke in my generation is because I'm like 90s, early 2000s, of like, we learned English from Cartoon Network. Like, if you had a TV, you had Cartoon Network on. And yeah. And the
Yeah.
dubbing, most of the time, if it's dubbed, most of the time is kind of shite. So you prefer the English version.
Yeah, we don't, that's a good thing as well. Like, we don't dub anything. Everything's always subtitled in Serbia. So everything is in its original version.
Hungarians have figured it out. They have decent dubbing because they bring in actors and properly do it. Whereas I know the Polish version used to be the lector, which is one guy reading everyone's lines. Everyone's.
Brilliant.
And
And all like flat, no performance, just lines.
Yes. And you can still hear the English dialogue,
Underneath.
lower, but yeah. It's just different countries adapted in different ways. But yeah, the Polish one sort of is hilarious. But okay, well, in that case, casting. Let's get into the casting stuff. I guess.
Let's get into the casting.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff I'm curious about with casting directors, I'm coming at it from a actor's point of view, obviously, and for actors, it's like they're these people that send you an email about an audition and they give you a chance and they take it away and it comes and it goes and and then they call you back for a recall, but that gets cancelled. Can you send the self-tape instead? So I'm like, let's see from like, it must be wild being in a casting office. Like, it has to be. Because I was watching obviously the Call My Agent, the French version, and I'm like, okay, it's comedy.
And
but
that I mean, I've not even watched the British version, but why they would remake it, I don't understand, because people are lazy and don't want to read subtitles. I don't know, but that's immense. That's one of my favorite shows of like the last few years. I love that show.
Yeah, but the thing with watching it, I was like, yeah, it's comedy, it's slightly heightened, but I'm like, oh, okay, you're part of the same rat race. You're literally trying to deal with the same madness. And I mean, there's a number of stuff. I mean, obviously, being an immigrant, there must be castings that you look at and you just roll your eyes in the back of your head, like, what is this? Like, do you have a different perspective as opposed to someone who's from the UK looking at casting types like, ugh, I don't know about that one.
I mean, yes. I also think there's not. I feel like, I mean, I work with Emily Tileli, so I'm at her office. So I'm a casting director, but we work together, and I'm a part of ET. So she's Australian. She's not British, same as me. I have another friend who's a casting director who's Spanish. And then I don't know anyone else who's not British. Everyone else I know is very much from this country, born and bred. This is going to sound potentially, iffy for me to say this, but I also feel like with casting directors and with agents, people are predominantly middle class. There's now this kind of big push, because I'm on the board of the CDA and I'm also a probation member with the CDG, and there's kind of this genuine push to open casting up to people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, people who have families who have nothing to do with the industry, who don't come from that world in the slightest, who wouldn't necessarily think of, being a casting director is a career for them, and opening it up to those people, same as there's been a very strong push in terms of inclusivity, and again, opening it up to people of different heritage, because then that means that people you're seeing on screen are, not what they used to be 20 years ago, all British, all white, all the same.
So you don't have John Wayne playing Genghis Khan.
Yeah, like you need different people from different countries, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different heritage, people who all look different, to be in those rooms behind those computer screens, making those decisions so that what you see on screen is representative of the society that we all live in. And that's the only way.
Like, to be fair, a lot of it's the networking. It's just you bring in people that you know. If you're middle class, chances are you'll know other middle class people, and they'll be amazed going to the same universities.
Yeah, which is kind of, I think, what we're very much at the moment trying to, to work on and to change. And there's like lots of different internships, and they've started that casting diploma at National Film and Television School, which is really cool. there's steps being made. Obviously, like any change, it takes time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think everyone I worked with so far, so I was with Kate and Lou for a few years, and then I've been with Emily for a few years now as well, and then I've done some bits in between by myself. I think when you work with other casting directors and you're in other casting offices, I think you kind of find each other, or at least that's been my experience, based on the type of things that you're into. So we're not going to, between ourselves, we're not going to vary that much in terms of, I will really like a particular actor and their performance, and then my colleague would be like, no, what are you talking about? We kind of tend to be more or less on the same page. Right. So I don't know whether not being British, although I am technically, but my husband and I say that we're fake British. We've got citizenships and passports, but like there's not a drop of British blood in us. I don't know whether that makes a difference, but obviously a lot of it is just, when it comes to casting, a lot of it is based on your personal taste and just your kind of feeling. And you actually can't teach someone how to do it. It's something that you kind of like acquire over the years of doing. You kind of develop your eye and, this feeling of what you believe is a good, believable, strong performance, and how that fits in with the rest of the script and the story that's being told, etc., etc. And I always say to people, you put 5 casting directors in a room, you give them the same brief, you'll end up with 5 different ensembles of actors, completely different, who will all do a great thing, but they'll all be very different. They'll be doing a different thing because, we all bring our own life experience and history and opinions and things that we watched in the past and what we liked. And, it's that thing, what was the expression? You should never discuss tastes, because it's just, there's no right or wrong. It's just all very different because we're all very unique. So yeah, I mean, we used to sometimes in the past, because we do a lot of commercials, there'd be very kind of silly things written in the casting brief, coming occasionally from production company or an ad agency, or, wanting something that's so kind of arbitrary that you're like, well, that's not, and often with brands, especially in the past, I think everyone is just, more up to speed now with it, just genuinely, not focusing so much on people needing to look a certain way, or, there's been a genuine push for, not only beautiful looking people on the screen, because that's not anyone's reality. But yeah, I think that's all changed. But in the past, we'd get like a ridiculous request, or like a very, like I'm not going to put that out on Spotlight Breakdown,
Handsome in a non-traditional way, but there's always like somehow they're handsome or good looking.
Yeah, so it's kind of more of that, and I think I don't even know what the question was.
Well, it was just more like if there's been like a wild casting brief where you're like, oof, like I don't know how to put this in polite society, as you said on Spotlight.
I mean, there's a lot of that, and I think people who clients who approach you who have experience with casting directors, that brief will already come, kind of ready made, and we can just share it pretty much and just do a copy paste. When people haven't had experience of working with casting directors, that they don't really know kind of how to necessarily phrase things, and then we just rewrite it.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
And also we know sometimes what they mean, even though they've not said it, or they've said it badly. We know what they're referring to.
Yeah, if you've seen their previous projects and such.
Yeah, and then we'll just know kind of how to word it so that agents get it. And also to, be considerate of everyone and not be, appearing exclusive. And it's because it's not, often actors ask like, oh, do you have an agents list, and, which agents do you work with and stuff. And I think, I mean, on occasion, we'll have like a select list, but that's only because we have a very small budget on something, and we just know that the likes of, bigger agencies are not even gonna not going to even look at it. So
All right.
it just doesn't go to them in that sense. But everything else, we always put it out to all agents because that's our job, you know, to open it up to everyone, and then for us to make that filter of who we think are the, you know, best 10, 15 options for that character. Then we would then get into the room or get a tape from and then go from there. I think kind of pre-selecting and picking and choosing and which agencies and, you know, people who've, you know, have X, Y, Z experience, I think it's limiting, and I think it's a shame. We don't, granted, you know, on commercials, we don't open it up to actors directly, but that's purely because already the volume of suggestions from agents is so vast.
Yeah, so
You know,
like
if I was to
realistic
tell you,
for one role, like what are we looking at numbers wise?
but like
We're looking at thousands, potentially
overall
hundreds.
it'll be thousands on a whole commercial if it's multiple characters, but like at a minimum, you know, for a commercial that's, you know, paying your kind of equity minimums, at least 600 options, you know. Give it in that like age range, say 25 to 35. It's like you're just drowning in suggestions, and we genuinely look at everyone and we go through stuff and we really, you know, really give it the time. So then if we were to open it up to actors as well, then that triples the work. When it goes directly to actors is if we're looking for something very specific and very niche, or if we're, you know, working on a short film and we kind of have the time and the freedom to genuinely open it up to everyone and see lots and lots and lots of people, you know, in those kind of instances. But yeah, there's so many actors out there, so many brilliant actors out there, that I don't know how any of you get up in the morning and do what you do, because it's very tough and very stressful, and you're kind of having to think like, you know, how do I make myself stand out? How do I, you know, I mean,
I'm still stuck on the 600 because in my head there's 600 headshots that you have to go through, and that must be fun.
At a minimum, like I can literally look at, let me see, this is not going to be the best example, this last one, because that's but I'll give you, okay, so there's a commercial that we're casting at the moment. It's just one character.
Right.
2,103 suggestions for one role.
One role. God.
2,103 plus agents who will email you directly. Plus sometimes you, on commercials, you have model agents who you're not necessarily in the spotlight, but they kind of get their briefs and stuff, and they send their packages as well.
They want to get their sort of into that,
yeah,
as well. Right.
There's so many. So yeah.
It is a numbers game. Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean yeah, go on, sorry.
And that's okay. It just that kind of rolled into the other question of like, how do you casting directors deal with the mental health aspect of it? And like, I was thinking, how do you handle rejection? Because I knew I was getting ready for this interview, so I was like, let me think about, you know, the day in the life of, and you basically get your little, you know, ragtag group of candidates and you present them, and then they get shot down, and then this one gets to that stage and they get shot down there. So it's like a little battle that's happening in front of you. Like, oh, come on, you can make it.
I mean, I think often what actors forget or maybe are not aware of, obviously, you know, we get the brief, we get the script, we get the project. We're not, you know, a part of that process of putting it together in the slightest. I mean, the thing that we have freedom with is our brief and how best to communicate what we need to agents or to actors who's going direct. On occasion, we'll say stuff like, and this is not a commercial project, let's be honest, but on a film, a short film, you know, we can nudge things along. So for example, I'm working on a feature film, it's in development at the moment, and I've kind of asked if perhaps one of the characters could be female, just because I kind of felt that the balance wasn't all there. We were kind of quite male heavy with 2 male protagonists. And I thought, well, this particular character can literally be male or female. There's no
not relevant to the story.
That's not relevant at all. So we can do those kind of, suggestions, let's say. And then we present our options. So say, on a commercial, usually it'll be something like between 12 to 15 per role. And for us, people we're presenting, whether it's a tape or you come into the studio, is we want all of you to be amazing. So that when the client gets the link, they're like, oh, who do we choose? We don't know. They're all great. That's our ideal scenario. And I think anyone who's ever had a bad experience with a casting director, I just find it so difficult to believe, because obviously it's in our best interest that everyone we present is brilliant. Because if people come in and they're unprepared or they're completely off brief or whatever, it reflects badly on us. It means that we didn't do the job properly. So that goes, with the whole in-person sessions. For me, it's always very important that people feel 100% comfortable and not stressed. And if they come in and I can see, the nerves are there and they're all the voice is not coming out and stuff, we always stop the camera, take a step out, bring someone else in, cool off for 5 minutes, let's do it again. I'm a big believer in anything you do that you should feel, at your most comfortable. Yes, challenged, creatively, but it needs to come from a place of feeling safe and comfortable and confident. So then you can take those risks and you can try those things out. But if you go in somewhere and you don't feel yourself, you're kind of, nervous, or the person on the other side is making you feel intimidated, then you're never gonna, you're not gonna stand a chance of doing your best job. Yeah. Which I think people sometimes forget as well, that, auditioning is a part of your job. It could be, 10 minutes of it, but there you are doing your thing. It also counts as
you're acting. You're still acting. It's just the audience is 3 or 4 people, not.
Yeah. So, yeah, and then I always used to, give my feedback and say who my favorite people were and what I thought and stuff. And sometimes you work with directors who, every time they come back with their selects and their notes, you're like, yes, exactly right, 100% agree, we're in complete agreement, that's exactly it. Very often it happens that they come back with a list of selects and you're like, really? But there were much stronger people that we've seen. Yeah. And you then just kind of, gauge the situation, whether you're going to push for someone and be kind of like, how about so-and-so? And then, sometimes they'll be like, oh yeah, let me give them another go. Yeah, they're good. Let's bring them back in. But it does happen on commercials, I would say. On films is different because your kind of working relationship with director and producer, it's longer, it takes a longer time. On commercials, we can turn it around all in a week sometimes. So it's very quick. Yeah, and sometimes it's something very arbitrary, as the ad agency creative who wrote the script had in mind that this person will have brown hair, and then that's kind of who gets picked. And it wasn't a requirement on the brief because it's something so silly and unimportant, but it's lots of different factors. And yeah, often you agree with those decisions and you're happy and you think, oh, the best person got the job. Other times, completely not who you thought was the best, who delivered the best performance, who gave the best read, who, and you just roll with it. And you just kind of, remind yourself that your part of the process is this, and kind of what comes before and after you can't really affect that much. You can kind of do little tweaks, little suggestions, little questions, but ultimately, directors or, ad agencies, clients, brands, whoever, they decide what they want, and then that's it.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. So you just have to, again, I guess, focus on what you can control as opposed to what you can't. Just stay sane in this mad business.
But what tends to happen often is that, we'll see, and a lot of casting directors say that, and it is really the truth, is you'll see someone and you really like them and they don't get that job, but because you really like them, you remember them and you bring them for something else or
Yeah.
for many something else's, and then eventually they get a thing because they're good and they deserve it, and because you spotted them way back when, and then you just kind of maintain that relationship. And that does often happen because that's just the nature of it, I guess. There'll be lots of brilliant people for every thing that you see on TV or in the cinema, whatever. I'm sure there was like 10 other actors who could have done just as brilliant of a job as the person who's actually cast in it. It just would have been different. And people on the team had their preference and they just end up with so and so.
Yeah. So there's yeah,
Yeah.
as many members of the team, as many moving factors, because whoever gets a say in the casting, they all have their own vision.
Yeah. And the bigger the project, when you're working for, I'm guessing, because we don't work for big studios as of yet, but having heard from people who do, and people who do stuff for the Netflix and whatever, that's all kind of decisions by committee. There's so many people in the process, and casting seems to be the thing that everyone gets most excited about and the thing that everyone has an opinion on, and then it's just lots of voices agreeing on so
Fair
it's
enough.
a lot of it's out of our hands, but it's kind of it's still fun to to kind of do that first filter, and to, especially, that's why we love doing shorts as well. You kind of get to work with director closely, and then there's no it's just about pleasing them, and then they're more likely to take your opinion on board because it's just really the dialogue kind of between the two people as to what's needed and what do you think, and rather than here are our options, and then you all over there, 20 of you, have a powwow and decide, and you come back with a decision. They're just different processes.
Fair play. I mean, this something that's been in my mind recently. I've been thinking about a lot, and you must have seen examples of this. I think one of the sort of unhealthier mantras that gets repeated to actors a lot is like the big break of chasing that one role that was gonna make you break your career. But if one role, I like to say, if one role makes your career, one role will break your career, and that's not realistic and healthy in any way. So, like, how many times is that actually the case? So it was like for people that think of like this one big thing and they've exploded into the stratosphere. You must have seen these people work in so many auditions before it, where they
Yeah,
got whole
some,
thing.
some have, and some do have that incredible luck of straight out drama school, get that incredible audition, land the first job, and then it just goes from there. But I think that's a very negative thing to be perpetuating and to be making people feel like that's what they need. Because you just have to remember that for every famous actor out there, for every name, for everyone with profile, there's like 100 actively working actors who your average person on the street don't know who they are.
But they're making their living.
Doesn't make them any less than. They're still doing their job. They're making a living. In my eyes, they're on par. It just so happens that this person over here has had the opportunity of being in the right place in the right time, and getting involved with a project that then had all the stars aligned for it as well, and then it took off, and then their career takes off with it.
Fair enough.
To me, there's no difference. I think if you're an actor and you're consistently working and you're being paid for it, whatever medium you're in, you're a successful actor, by default. And yes, some people will be, in major studio movies making millions, but that goes for any industry.
That's fair enough. Let's take a quick break, and I've got just a couple of closing questions, and I'll get back to you. Thank you. Welcome back again. We're getting to the end of the interview now, but I wanted to ask something which I thought was kind of important. In your experience, what can immigrant actors do? Obviously, it really depends on where they're from, because everyone's perceived in a different way and have to approach it, and they can be marketed in a different way. But what would be the most significant thing for them to do in order to work in the British market?
Very good question. I would say, if you can, to definitely maintain the connection with your home country, because I know of a few actors who have managed to do both. So, you know, work back home when the right thing comes up and work here as well. And recently someone was sending me a show reel. I introduced them to an agent, and they have this like big TV career happening in Norway, but they've not done much here. I'm always interested in seeing European actors, even if they've not done very much here. If they've done cool stuff wherever else they may be doing, it all adds up. In terms of working here, it does depend what type of work you want to do. I think, you know, if you want to genuinely feel like you are being considered just on the basis of your talent and abilities, etc. I'm not going to lie, and that's coming from a foreigner myself. This place is still very... I often get asked where my accent is from.
Yeah.
So it's still, regardless of how, you know, we're all open and inclusive and everyone welcome and blah, blah, blah. Still, I know for a fact most of our projects that we cast, you know, if there are lines being spoken, very often it would be RP, specific regional accent, you know, and then for particular roles, it will be, oh, you know, we want someone who is maybe a bilingual, I don't know, French speaker, and then their English does have a French accent because that's part of the role, etc.
Yeah,
But those opportunities, there aren't as many of them. So I would say, yeah, work. I mean, it sounds horrible, and I'm not happy about it, and I really genuinely wish that it didn't matter. But it's, you know, your British shows, your British films, you know, they all want you to sound a certain way. So I think
it also makes sense from a storytelling point of view. If that's your primary audience, and they can tell if you sound like you're not from there, you know, that's... Yeah. Unless you're Mel Gibson in Braveheart, in which case, you know, the Scots are like, huh?
Yeah. So I think that's, you know, if you have a good ear, and I think it's a case of, you know, just practicing it, and it doesn't, you know, your native accent can be whatever you want it to be. It doesn't matter. But, you know, your performing accent for whatever the character is, what the script is and stuff, you know, as you kind of need to cheat it as much as possible and sound as much as possible as what you need to be sounding. And I sometimes say to actors, you know, we'll on occasion have, oh, you know, they want American actors for this thing. And then, you know, everyone would just, you know, even if you're not American, you have to have a really good, you know, strong US accent. And then I say to people, if we're, you know, if you're doing an ident at the end of the tape, just do it all in that accent. Don't give them the opportunity to question whether you this or that. Just kind of do it all in accent, and then you can reveal later on that that's not actually your native accent, whatever that is. Because sometimes I think, you know, people like, you know, people will get it in their heads. They'll hear what you actually sound like, and they're like, nah, I'm not buying it. It's like, no, you're not buying it because you didn't buy the performance. It's just now because you heard this other thing, so you know, it's just messing with you.
There's a really good example of this. Idris Elba doing String a Bell in The Wire, that's in Baltimore, and I just remember watching an interview of him talking about he did in the in-person meeting, he did it in his Baltimore accent. Because people can't, you know, your first impression is so important with everything, you know. Very often you'll go from, you know, watching someone and being like, oh, not really, to then doing a full 180 and thinking, no, actually, yeah, they're really good. You know, your more or less your kind of initial response to someone's performance is kind of what you go with. And you kind of have that
respond straight away whether it's something is like, yeah, I'm buying this, yes, this performance is believable, I'm watching the character, great, or I'm not. So
as one of the first investments an immigrant actor should have, besides acting lessons, is accent lessons, is what you're saying?
I think so. And I think, you know, if you're an actor and you already speak another language, which already is an achievement in itself, you know, and presumably as an actor, even in your native language, you should, in my opinion, have a range of accents you can do. Yeah. And basically all accents are different melodies.
Yeah.
And you just need to master those. And I think it's possible. And, you know, when people say it offends me to no end, you know, and obviously, you know, as a Serb, I'll notice, but, you know, there's like a Serbian character and always a baddie and a thing. And then their name is not a real name. Like no one would have that name. It just doesn't exist. Someone just made it up.
Yeah.
And then the accent is always Russian. And it's like, we don't speak like that. When people speak English and there's a Serbian accent, it's different. They're different sounds. And it's like, you didn't even bother to research this and get someone who can do it. You know,
I mean, yeah, I do stand up and I have a whole thing about once you get past Austria, we all sound like this. Hello, like,
yeah, it's like, but we actually don't, because our languages don't sound, you know, we are all the same group of languages, like we're all Slav languages, but our languages are so vastly different and the sounds are different and the kind of the harshness or the softness of it is completely different. Like whenever I say to people I'm from Serbia, they was like, oh yeah, well, I mean, not even going to tell you how many people think that that's like ex-SSSR. I get asked that a lot. So like, oh, you used to be, you know, with Russia. No, could not be further away from there. Like Russia's miles and miles away. Like we're in the middle. We're quite Central Europe, actually. We're not even East. But yeah, it's the thing of accents. Like, oh, is that being quite similar to Russian? No, really not. Other than we have Cyrillic as well.
Yeah.
But we also use the Latin alphabet, so we have both, and the sounds are vastly different. So, yeah, you know, sounds, accents.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's a lot of moving factors in that, and I love accents because I'm quite geeky, and I love things that are like very different, and just a tiny shift, and it makes all the difference. But yeah, I don't even know where I was going with this, but yeah, it's one of those things that people kind of judge you a bit on it, and depending on how authentic it is, they're more willing to forgive you on stage for, you know, or believe you on stage as opposed to
not. Exactly.
Well, yeah, I have had the Serbian audition with a Serbian gang affiliated club owner, so yes.
Next time you have your Serbian audition, you let me know. And we can work on your accent.
I literally YouTubed, you know, like speaking Serbian, and I was like, okay, I'm trying to do the vowels because the O is slightly different and the things like that.
Well, I'll give you a good example. There's an actor in the last season of Stranger Things who plays Yuri. He's a Serbian actor, Nikola Đuričko, who actually we went to the same drama studio, although he's much older than me. He's kind of doing a little bit of a kind of, you know, Russian like twang because he's meant to be Russian, but actually if you look up any of his interviews in English, like that's what a Serbian person speaking English would sound like.
Fair play. The other thing, I mean, this is just a tiny question because again, don't want to take up too much of your time, but what's the wildest thing an actor has done to get your attention and that they should not do ever again?
I've not really had any wild ones, to be fair. I mean, I did have a person who randomly showed up at the office, waited outside, wanted to talk to me, but didn't tell anyone why. It all felt very weird and uncomfortable. So then I just kind of didn't engage with it because it's, you know, it's not like they came up and said like, hey, I'm an actor, I'm hoping to speak to Zita really quickly. You know, they were just kind of wanted to speak to me, but wouldn't tell anyone else why. They were just kind of there lurking outside the door. And I was like, this is just creeping me out. And I still actually, to this day, I don't know if he was an actor. I just presumed that he was, but that's kind of, you know, sure, turn up somewhere. I mean, I would say not unannounced, like try and arrange a meeting before and see if the person is open to like having a chat or having a coffee with you. You don't want to
So
freak anyone out.
don't
But
stop
if,
people. No taking.
yeah, but if you do, then at least, you know, kind of introduce yourself, say who you are, why you're there, just be a normal person about it. But nothing really extreme. You know, we'd get like very funny email openings, which I understand why people do it. You know, you want to be the person who's remembered because he was remembered because, you know, you had like some kind of a funny email opening or, you know,
Yeah.
but there's really no need. Just be yourself. Keep it short and sweet. Have the link there that we can click on. I always say, if there's a specific thing that you want us to watch and give you notes on, or if you've got a show coming up or something's being aired that you've done, or here's a link to my short or whatever, that's great. And just short and sweet. And
yeah, I tend to put the links to like towards like I do the first introduction link. If you want to see more, you can read more down here because like
yeah,
just save you the time.
no one has time to, you know, like to do a whole essay of this is me and this is what I've done. Ultimately, we'll just click on your spotlight and we'll see you there. And if there's a reel there, brilliant. I mean, yeah, number one tip for me, you know, always have a reel on, even if you don't have a professional reel of all the professional work that you've done and you've not done, you know, you don't have like 10 years worth of material. A self-tape on there is totally fine.
Right.
One that you feel, you know, shows who you are as a performer and kind of, you know, shows us some range. Yeah, and it's totally fine to contact casting directors. And I think sometimes it's okay to say, you know, I've had actors in the past just get in touch and wanted to grab a coffee and have a chat. Usually people who are, you know, moving in from a different country or, you know, from a different city and they don't have very many contacts and they're like, look, I'm just starting out. Can we, you know, can I get your coffee? We just have a little chat. Like, that's fine. If I have time, 100%. And we always say, you know, if we're not replying, it doesn't mean that your email's getting deleted. Like, they all get filed. We go through them later on. You know, we are considering everyone who gets in touch as well as everyone who's suggested by their agents.
Fair.
Yeah, I think the simpler, the better. Just keep it short and sweet. Make sure your headshots are up to date, that they actually look like what you look like currently, that you have a reel on there, that if you have a thing that you're doing, that you're inviting casting directors to it, be it a show or if you've got something to share with them. And then the rest of the time, just build your own creative community of other actors and directors and writers who are like in the same place in their career where you at, so that you can kind of genuinely, you know, lean on each other. You'll have a self-tape coming for tomorrow and you need a reader, and if you don't have those contacts, you're going to have to struggle and like ask your mum to read in for you, which is not going to be good for anyone involved, or you're going to have to like record your own lines, and then it's just, you know, whereas you have a few mates, you'll help them out with their tapes, they'll help you out, then they'll, you know, be doing this short film that they've written, and they're self-funding, and then, you know, oh, can you do it? Yeah, let's do it. And then it's that.
It's a free team building exercise. Yeah,
and it's about kind of, you know, I know most of you have to do other things to make a living, and I think often people, you know, perhaps forget that. But I think if you have enough time and energy to kind of be working on your own things in your spare time, even if it's literally, you know, grabbing like a couple of pages of script from a film that you love and just doing a tape for yourself and having a little play and maybe coming up with something that you really enjoy and then sticking that on your spotlight, you know, even that's being proactive in doing something. I think how things are set up here, you know, it's often about, do you have an agent? Who's your agent? Are they putting up for the right things? Are you, you know, meeting the right casting directors? Blah, blah, blah. Yes, all true. But then there's a whole other side to it of the things that you can be doing for yourself, by yourself, with your fellow creatives, where you're still, you know, exercising the muscle and doing your thing that will make you feel fulfilled, and not just waiting for the phone, the ring, for the email to
pop up. Because that's like, if you want to stay sane, you have to be active. Otherwise, it will just.
Yeah.
go
And
around.
also, you know, on top of it all is to very much have other things going on in your life, other interests, other things that bring you joy, that it's not, because I think the most confident actors I have met tend to have other things going on, and they're doing other things, whether they're, you know, writing their own stuff or they're doing something completely unrelated, or, you know, so when they come into an audition, it's very much like, oh, let's play, you know, I'll do this little thing and, you know, it'll be what you want or it won't be what you want, but then I'll leave and I've got all this other stuff going on, and I won't be putting so much pressure on myself to get everything that I go for, and then if I don't, it's a disaster. I think it's a job that requires so much mental strength that the only way to achieve that is to have other things in your life that
relieving that pressure and the need to succeed and achieve every single time.
And also, I would say, as much as, yes, social media is important, blah 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 blah, like, post your stuff if you have things to share or whatever, you know, stuff that you've done, but then don't scroll for hours on end and see what other people are doing, because it will always appear that everyone else is doing all this incredible work and you're not. And it's not the case. Even people who are sharing stuff, you know, that might be something that they did last year, but they're kind of doing another little push about it or whatever. Even as a casting director, I've kind of learned I have to go on social media for work. I maintain the, you know, CDA social media side. I do it for ET. I've got my own personal stuff. I kind of do it to help the actors out who, you know, invite me to a show. If I enjoyed it, I like to tweet about it so other people go and see it, or projects that we worked on, or someone needs a push in social media. So I kind of do my little bits, but I try not to go through full timeline of what everyone else is doing, because then there's always going to be someone who's doing bigger and better things than you, and then you're left feeling like, oh, but why am I not there? Why am I not doing this thing? And it's just not a healthy place to be at.
No, absolutely.
So, you know, use it to connect with people, to have the dialogue going, post your stuff. Sure, engage with people, but don't give yourself to endless scrolling, because most people have the tendency, you know, it's been discussed many times before, especially on Instagram and stuff, you know, this whole kind of curating their lives, always out doing the fun thing, always looking like they're having the best time. It's this amazing trip, it's this amazing project that I'm doing, and it's like, it's endless. So it's best not to do too much of that.
Yeah, and meanwhile, chances are they're doing that because they're slightly addicted and they need to do the thing to feel good, which is, yeah. Okay, well, we're almost there now. Final two questions, quick ones.
Go.
Immigrants do all kind of crazy jobs to pay the bills. What's one that stands out to you that you've done?
That I've done? Oh, I've had so many. I mean, I worked in pubs, not pretty crazy. I worked at the old Tottenham Stadium at White Hart Lane, right, before they had their big refurb, like many years ago. I did a little bit of temping for a company who was doing catering there, and I was doing the VIP boxes, and that was really funny, just having these people being served these meals and having their alcoholic drinks in like teacups, because that's like, you know, they couldn't be seen drinking alcohol because people in the stands weren't. And then having like a 15-minute break and going to like an empty VIP box and like watching football. That was pretty cool. I worked at Harrods for quite a few years at different concessions. That's like different crazy rich people coming in and like buying 10 pairs of shoes by just pointing at things, and you're like putting these bags. That was crazy. One of the jobs in Harrods, I was with a fine jewelry company, and on one occasion I sold a diamond ring for £150,000.
That's a house.
That's really crazy. It's funny how like working in luxury also, even though I was never obviously in a position to be afford any of the things that I was selling, But it's funny how things, you know, a pair of shoes that's £400, you're like, oh, these are only £400. It's funny how those amounts of money, and
Just
when
mentally,
you're
yeah.
handling things, it just becomes like, you know, oh, it's only these earrings that are like only 50 grand. Oh, not very expensive. You know, it's crazy. That was pretty funny. I worked at a hairdresser's. I worked at lots of different clothes shops. What else did I do?
And you literally did anything and everything you had to do.
Yeah, I co-directed a music video for my husband's music project. That was funny. I feel like there's probably something else out there. I mean, I've done a lot of different things,
I think you
and I think
covered it.
that's my advice for immigrants as well, whether creatives or otherwise, is just to kind of throw yourself at anything and everything, because what I found, especially in London, is that you spend the most time with people you work with. It's just the nature of this city. You'll have friends, they live in different parts of the city. You'll see them once every however many months. The older you get, the further apart those meetings are. People you're working with and you have that kind of continuity of time spent together are actually people who end up being your friends. So all my close friends in London are people I worked with at one of those random jobs that I did.
Yeah,
And then we just stayed friends, you know?
that's true. And then
Yeah.
my final question is food
Yeah.
related. What is the Serbian dish people in the UK need to know about?
Oh my God,
There's
so
probably
many.
more than one. I'm sorry.
I would say the thing that we call is going to be a very unpopular thing to say in this climate, but it's a thing that we called Russian salad.
Right.
I don't even know whether it's got anything to do with Russia, because there's also like just your regular ham we call Prague ham. I mean, why? I don't know. Anyway, Russian salad is, there's lots of different variations of it, but you make your own mayo.
Yeah.
And then there's like bits of ham, chicken, peas, carrots. It's all finely cut, gherkins. So there's a little bit of sour stuff, and it's usually thing that you'd have around Christmas and New Year's.
Yeah.
Make it in a massive bowl, and then it's like a kind of side little thing. But then day 2 or 3, you just get the bowl and you're just at it with a fork. You don't even eat anything else. It's so filling. It's so rich. It's sweet and sour. You got your protein, you got your veg. It's all great. You can put it on some bread if you want.
Yeah,
You can eat it without. Yeah.
It's we have a French word. I think in Romania they call it French salad, but also we call it salade de boeuf, which is kind of but it's basically just whatever meat that's been cooked and some gherkins and everything chopped so finely, and then there's like this much mayo on it at the top.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. Potatoes. Yeah. So you'll have your eggs, and you'll like do them with whatever else, like kind of a bit of cream and stuff, and you make your own homemade mayo, which is like the glue that binds it all together. I mean, the calorie intake on that, I think, is like, teaspoon is like, 500 calories. But anyway, that's if you're in Serbia, like around Christmas time, New Year's, we have this thing called Slava, which is your Saints Day, and each family has their own Saints Day and gets passed on, blah blah blah. That's like a staple food for Saints Day. It's that. There's always a bowl of that somewhere, and people are just like topping up their plates with. But yeah, usually I associate it with like Christmas and New Year. And
that's a good stuff. I know that. That's good. All right, well, thank you so much. I'm gonna stop the recording. Thank you again.